You know, we've got so used to just seeing Elizabeth's coins in our change, and now we're going to see another face on our circulating coins.
King Charles just made an announcement, and it is not the one anyone expected. No speech, no palace statement. Just more than 23 million brand new coins bearing his face.
For 70 years at the Royal Mint, we've been striking coins for Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. We're changing that monarch for the first time in 70 years. Today we're striking the first coins of King Charles III.
Released at the exact moment the whole country is whispering that his reign may be quietly ending, and the person reportedly most shaken by everything behind it is standing right beside him. Queen Camilla is said to be deeply worried, and once you understand why, you will realize this announcement was never really about a coin at all. It was about her. Stay to the end, because the final piece of this story changes everything before it. The pressure builds. Let me tell you what has actually happened to King Charles over the last 2 years, because once you see it laid out, the abdication talk stops sounding crazy. And that announcement from the opening, the newly designed 5-pence coin bearing his portrait, the first change to that coin in 17 years, will make a lot more sense once you see what it was answering. We will get there. First, the man himself. This is a man who waited longer than any heir in British history. 7 decades watching his mother carry the crown he was born to wear. And then, barely 17 months into his own reign, in February of 2024, Buckingham Palace announced he had cancer. What kind? They never said. To this day, they still have not. The most photographed man in Britain, the face on every coin and every stamp, is fighting an illness his own subjects are not allowed to name. He is 77 years old, he is still in treatment, and he is keeping a schedule that would flatten men half his age. The person reportedly most alarmed by that is his own wife. According to reports circulating all year, Camilla is deeply worried about his health and about his absolute refusal to slow down. Not politely concerned, worried. Picture her position for a second. She watches him leave for engagement after engagement, still in treatment, still saying yes to everything, and reportedly cannot talk him out of any of it. And here is the part that makes her worry different from everyone else's. If his health ever forces the question the palace refuses to ask, she is the one person in this family whose entire future gets thrown into the air with it. Hold that thought, because we are coming back to it. She is reportedly not alone in her concern either, because the people closest to the king have started asking, out loud, a question that used to be forbidden. Not whether Charles can reign, whether he should. Then in March, an insider account dropped that royal circles have been arguing about ever since. It claimed an abdication is expected within the year. The logic it described was cold and simple. Health gives the palace the one explanation nobody can attack. If Charles steps back, it will be framed entirely on his terms, measured, dignified, never a surrender. The same source went further. It claimed that in every practical sense, William is already functioning as king, and that the institution is preparing itself emotionally even while the paperwork sits untouched. The palace disputes all of this. None of it is confirmed. But notice something. Abdication used to be the one word you could not say inside Buckingham Palace. People are saying it constantly now. Every cancelled engagement becomes evidence. Every tired photograph becomes a headline. Every event William attends in his father's place gets counted. And if the whispers are even half true, one obvious question follows. Who exactly is pushing hardest for the king to go? A son grows impatient. The answer, according to reporting published this summer, is the last person you would expect to say it publicly, his own son. Sources claim Prince William has become increasingly insistent in private, urging his father to step down from the throne and focus on his health, not once, repeatedly. And every time, the king has reportedly refused, determined to follow his mother's example. Queen Elizabeth II famously declared that her whole life, whether long or short, would be devoted to service. She meant every word of it. She reigned until the day she died. Charles reportedly intends to do exactly the same. But here is where it gets uncomfortable, because the friction between father and son does not stop at the throne. Take Harry. The king has reportedly stayed open to some kind of reconciliation with his younger son and Meghan, while William is said to want nothing to do with the Sussexes at all. Then there was the king's meeting with the American president, which William reportedly opposed at a moment when the White House was openly criticizing the British Prime Minister. Believing the monarchy was being dragged into political waters it had no business entering, the king went ahead anyway. Each fight on its own would just be a father and son butting heads. Together, they describe something much bigger, a monarchy with two centers of gravity. Courtiers reportedly talk about two camps forming inside the institution, one loyal to the reign that exists, one preparing for the reign that is coming. And every appointment, every leaked story, every quiet decision gets read through that lens now. Elizabeth never let a rival court form around her heir. She never had to. Her authority was never in question. Charles does not have that luxury anymore, because when a king is ill and an heir is impatient, power does not wait for a ceremony. It drains quietly from one office to the other. Ask anyone who works inside those walls, off the record, and they will reportedly tell you the same thing. Everyone can feel which direction it is flowing, and nobody is pretending otherwise anymore. Quick pause, because what comes next is the part of this story almost nobody is covering honestly. If you are getting value from this breakdown, hit subscribe right now so you do not miss what happens to this family next, because things are moving faster than they have in decades. Now, back to it. Here is the question that should be keeping the palace up at night. If William is already carrying the workload, already commanding his own camp, already king in everything but name, then what exactly is still holding Charles to the throne? The answer has a name, and the name is Andrew, the Andrew Shadow. Every royal crisis has an accelerant, something that takes a slow, manageable problem and turns it into a fire nobody can contain. For King Charles, that accelerant is his own brother. You know the outline of Andrew's fall, but feel the speed of it, stripped of his military affiliations, stripped of his royal patronages. Then, in a move that stunned even veteran royal correspondents, stripped of the title he was born with, reduced from prince to private citizen, and forced out of royal lodge, the mansion he clung to for 2 decades. Most people assumed that was rock bottom. It was not. Because according to reports this year, authorities have reportedly been moving against Andrew over alleged misconduct in public office, as the fallout from the Epstein files keeps widening. And the questions are no longer just about Andrew. They are about who knew what and when. One palace insider claimed, in an account that has spread everywhere, that Charles knew more than he ever let on, and that the whole institution, top to bottom, spent years protecting its own brand instead of facing the truth. Now, that is an allegation, and it remains exactly that. But think about what it does. It turns Andrew from a family embarrassment into an institutional threat. Because the moment the public starts believing the monarchy shielded him, the question stops being what happens to Andrew. It becomes something far more dangerous. Why should any of them stay? And according to insider accounts, that is the exact pressure crushing the king. One source claimed his health has been visibly declining under the strain, describing the Andrew situation as almost too much for him to bear, and predicting abdication could come as early as this summer, with health offered as the official cover story for a decision actually forced by scandal. William, meanwhile, is reported to have been ruthless about his uncle from the start. Sources claim he pushed relentlessly for Andrew's removal and will do nothing, absolutely nothing, to protect him now. Charles reportedly cannot fully bring himself to do the same. One brother is blood, the other is a liability. The father sees both, the son sees only one. And the shadow keeps spreading because reports claim Beatrice and Eugenie, Andrew's daughters, are living in a kind of horrific limbo, with no idea whether their royal statuses survive into the next reign. So, an ill king, an impatient heir, a brother facing the courts, 2 nieces in limbo. Which raises the question the palace refuses to engage with. How much more weight can one 77-year-old man in cancer treatment actually carry? The health question. Let us talk directly about the thing the palace least wants discussed, because it sits underneath everything else. The king's cancer has never been publicly identified. Everything we know is what the palace chose to release. Diagnosed in early 2024 during treatment for an enlarged prostate. Treatment ongoing ever since. Duties continued, sometimes reduced, sometimes resumed. And a steady drip of official reassurance that the king remains positive, active, and fully committed. Some of that reassurance looks genuine. Insiders sympathetic to Charles insist he is winning his battle, crediting his determination and spirit, and pushing back hard on any claim that illness is forcing his hand. He completed a landmark state visit to the Holy See, meeting Pope Leo XIV at the Apostolic Palace, a genuinely historic moment for a monarch who is also Supreme Governor of the Church of England. But other accounts tell a harder story. Reports have repeatedly claimed doctors have urged the king to lighten his workload, that the combination of treatment and non-stop institutional crisis is taking a toll no press release can hide, that William keeps absorbing more of his father's duties, not as a courtesy, but as a necessity. And that leaves the monarchy in a trap. If the king is as strong as the palace insists, the abdication reports are just noise, and the institution can wait them out. But if the reports are even partly right, every month of delay makes the eventual handover look less like a choice and more like a collapse. The monarchy survives, as one insider put it, because it adapts before it has to. The question is whether that window is closing. Elizabeth faced her own version of this at the end, and her answer was total refusal. She would not abdicate, ever. Even as her mobility failed, even as she passed individual duties to her son, the crown itself was never on the table. Charles reportedly holds the same conviction with the same intensity. But his mother never faced a criminal investigation circling her sibling, a son demanding the crown, and a cancer diagnosis all at once. She carried one crisis at a time across 70 years. He is carrying all of them at once in his late 70s in treatment. Conviction is powerful. Biology does not negotiate. And if biology ever wins that argument, one person loses more than anyone else in the building, and it is not Charles. Camilla's impossible position. Here is the question this whole story has been building toward, the one hiding in plain sight. If King Charles ever does step down, by choice or by necessity, what happens to Queen Camilla? You would assume the answer is written down somewhere. It is not. There is no rulebook, no statute, no protocol, no precedent in modern British history that says what a queen becomes when a living king voluntarily walks away from his throne. And that missing answer is exactly why the question makes the palace so nervous. Because think about how fragile Camilla's title has always been. When she married Charles in 2005, the official announcement said she would one day be known as Princess Consort, a deliberately shrunken title, invented specifically to calm a public that had not forgiven her. It took 17 years, and the direct intervention of Queen Elizabeth herself, who declared during her Platinum Jubilee that it was her sincere wish for Camilla to be known as Queen Consort before that changed. And only at the coronation in May of 2023 did the palace quietly drop the word consort altogether. She became, simply, Queen Camilla. Now, notice the pattern. Every single step of that climb needed a reigning monarch to protect it. Her queenship exists because Charles reigns. The moment he stops reigning, she enters territory no British queen has ever stood on. This is why her reported worry matters so much more than it first appears. Reports all year have described Camilla as deeply anxious about her husband's health and his refusal to slow down. Genuine concern for the man, no question. But royal observers point to a second layer nobody says out loud. An abdication would not just end her husband's reign, it would pull the institutional floor out from under her own feet and hand the decision about what she becomes to the next monarch, to William, a man whose relationship with his stepmother has been described over the years as correct, courteous, and cold. Walk through the options one by one, and you start to understand the silence. If William let her remain Queen Camilla, while his own wife became Queen Catherine, Britain wakes up with two living queens. No modern parallel. Endless confusion. Endless resentment. If she takes some invented dowager style instead, the demotion is public and humiliating, an echo of the princess consort compromise she spent 2 decades escaping. And if she simply fades from royal life, retreating to Ray Mill House, the private home she has always kept, the message about her 50-year story is brutal and unmistakable. The institution tolerated her while it had to, and released her the moment it could. Europe is the only place you can look for guidance, and the picture should terrify her advisors, because there is no pattern at all. When Juan Carlos of Spain abdicated in 2014, his wife Sofia kept using the title of Queen as a courtesy. When Beatrix of the Netherlands stepped down in 2013, she went back to being a princess. Denmark's Margrethe kept her queenly style after her shock abdication in 2024, but she was a reigning monarch, not a consort. 3 abdications, 3 completely different outcomes, The only constant is that the answer belonged to whoever held power next. And the single British precedent that exists points somewhere darker. The last time this country watched a king give up his throne, the woman he loved was denied royal status entirely. Wallis Simpson spent the rest of her life married to a former king while being refused the style of Her Royal Highness, a wound Edward treated as an insult he never forgave. Nobody is suggesting William would be that calculated or that cruel, but when the only map you have leads off a cliff, you understand why nobody at the palace wants to open it. There is one more detail that makes this even sharper. Camilla has no independent constitutional standing at all. William was born into the line of succession. Beatrice and Eugenie, whatever happens, were born royal. Camilla married in, late, against the loudest public opposition any royal bride has ever faced, and every protection she has ever held was granted, personally, by a monarch. First by Elizabeth, then by Charles. There is no third monarch on that list, not yet. And nothing anywhere obliges the next one to add his name to it. So the question no one will answer just sits there. And in the absence of an answer, the palace has been doing something else entirely. Sending signals. The palace pushes back. When the ground starts moving under this institution, it never argues back. It answers with symbols. And that brings us back to where we started. The coin. Late last year, right as abdication speculation hit one of its peaks, the Royal Mint announced a newly designed 5-pence coin bearing the king's portrait. The first modification to that coin in 17 years. More than 23 million of them pressed into circulation, officially described as a shining symbol of heritage and renewal. Royal watchers translated it instantly. You do not mint tens of millions of new coins in the image of a king who is about to leave. The signals kept coming. The Vatican state visit. A full calendar. Insider briefings insisting the king enjoys his duties, feels no burden he cannot carry, and has no intention of handing anything over in the near future. One report late last year flat out declared the abdication rumor dead, pointing to the coinage as proof Charles plans to reign to the end. And honestly, that version has real weight behind it. Voluntary abdication is profoundly alien to the British crown. It has happened exactly once in the modern era, and the trauma of that one occasion shaped the entire psychology of the House of Windsor. Elizabeth reigned for 70 years, partly as a lifelong act of repair for what her uncle broke. Charles learned that lesson at her knee. For him, reigning until death is not stubbornness. It is doctrine. But look at what the strategy actually is. Coins, ceremonies, anonymous reassurance. None of it touches the underlying arithmetic. An ill king in his late 70s, a scandal that keeps producing headlines, an heir who, by every serious account, is already carrying a growing share of the load. Symbols can buy a monarchy time. They cannot buy its certainty. And if you want to know what happens when the time runs out anyway, there is only one place to look. December 1936. The ghost of 1936. To understand what abdication would really do to this family, you have to go back to the only time Britain has lived through one, because everything the Windsors fear is buried in that story, and so is everything Camilla should fear. In December of 1936, Edward VIII announced he was voluntarily giving up the throne, the first English monarch ever to do so, in order to marry the American divorcee Wallis Simpson. His brother became George VI, a shy, stammering man who never wanted the crown, whose 10-year-old daughter, a princess named Elizabeth, suddenly found herself first in line. The institution survived. The family never healed. Edward was exiled in everything but name. His wife was refused royal rank until the day she died. The brothers barely spoke again. And George VI, crushed by a role he never asked for during the most dangerous decade in modern history, died at 56, leaving his daughter to inherit at 25 and to conclude, for the rest of her life, that abdication was not freedom, it was abandonment. Every royal born since has been raised inside the shadow of that conclusion, including the king now being asked to repeat it. Now, hold that story up against this exact moment, and the reflections are chilling. Then, a king forced to choose between the crown and the woman beside him. Now, a king whose departure would throw the status of the woman beside him into open question. Then, a reluctant successor inheriting as crisis gathered. Now, a successor reportedly pushing to inherit while crisis gathers around his uncle. Then, a fracture that lasted generations. Now, a family already fractured, one son estranged across an ocean, a brother facing the courts. But there is one enormous difference, and it is the argument quietly made by the people who think Charles should actually consider going. In 1936, abdication was chaos because nobody planned it. A modern, managed handover could be the exact opposite, a father still alive to guide his son. A transition measured in dignity instead of grief. Denmark did it in 2024, and the Danish monarchy came out stronger. Some in royal circles reportedly believe this is precisely the adaptation the British crown needs before events force a far messier version of the same ending. And there is a second argument, whispered rather than said. In 1936, the crisis was the abdication. In 2026, the abdication might be the escape from the crisis. If the Andrew situation gets worse, if the courts drag the institution itself into questions of complicity, then a clean break, a new king, a visible line drawn between past and future, might be the only move that protects the monarchy at all. In that world, Charles would not be abandoning his duty. He would be performing its final and most painful act. Maybe. But every managed handover still needs someone to answer the Camilla question. And so far, the silence from every corner of the palace has been absolute, which leaves just one thing to figure out. Where does this actually go from here? The road ahead. So here is where the House of Windsor stands as this summer unfolds. Every piece on the board is exactly where the last 2 years placed it, and every single one of them is under more pressure than the palace will ever admit. A 77-year-old king, still in treatment, still refusing to yield, reportedly telling the people around him that his reign will end the way his mother's did and not one day sooner. An heir described as ready, insistent, and in practical terms already halfway to the throne, backed by a wife the public adores and shadowed by a family he has largely cut away. A disgraced brother whose legal troubles could still detonate under the institution at any moment. 2 nieces waiting to find out if their world survives the next reign. And Camilla, exactly where she has always been, beside the king, watching, a woman who spent 50 years fighting her way from national villain to crowned queen, now facing the possibility that everything she won could be redefined overnight by a single signature. And the hand holding the pen would not be her husband's, it would be her stepson's. She has survived worse odds than these. Nobody who watched her go from the most hated woman in Britain to the balcony of Westminster Abbey would ever count her out. But for the first time since her coronation, her future is a question someone else gets to answer. The palace insists nothing is changing. The reports insist everything already has. Both cannot be true. And remember what history teaches here. In the weeks before the 1936 abdication, the British public knew almost nothing. The papers held the story. The palace projected calm. Then, in the space of a few December days, 1,000 years of certainty rearranged itself overnight. Institutions like this one do not announce their earthquakes in advance. They deny them, right up until the ground moves. So, whatever happens next, whether Charles reigns another decade or stuns the world before the year is out, keep your eyes on the thing this whole story circles, not who wears the crown, what becomes of the woman standing next to it. If this breakdown gave you something the headlines did not, subscribe right now and turn notifications on, because this story is nowhere near finished, and we will be on every development as it breaks. And drop your answer in the comments, because we genuinely want to know. If Charles does step down, should William allow Camilla to keep the title of queen, or should it end with his father's reign? We will see you in the next one.